Yes. So, good morning. You see the name of the workshop so that you're in the right place. I'm Dr. Chatlos. I'm a child and adolescent and addiction psychiatrist. I've been in New Jersey for many years, and I'm currently at Rutgers, New Brunswick. I'm running the outpatient addiction dual diagnosis program in New Brunswick, and I have a private practice in Holmdel. And in working with addiction for many years, I've had to work with spirituality and spiritual experience. And I began looking at it and trying to understand it, and what we're going to present here is a framework, because what mental health and mental health workers are not going to take care of everything that needs to be taken care of. Any of you that were here yesterday, you heard there's not enough of us to go around for what needs to be done. We need to really seriously look at creating a community, and one of the major helpers that we could be and should be working with are our faith communities. And we'll talk about that. Let's just go. So I will be going fast because I want to leave enough time for Reverend Caldwell to talk. But we're in the process of starting a new coalition between faith leaders and mental health professionals, because it doesn't exist in New Jersey. And there's no organization that's doing it. And so we're looking at how do we do it? What do we need to do? And one of the things that's needed, I think, is a common language. So let's look. The formal objectives: we're going to review research of the impact of religious and spiritual involvement as social determinants of health and mental health. Describe how a common focus on self-worth and dignity can unify efforts with the mental health system and faith communities to create a village that empowers youth and adult well-being, and explore opportunities to build a working coalition of mental health faith communities to work toward a statewide community of empowered self-worth and dignity that promotes spiritual development as a powerful way of life. Now, from the beginning, if you were at the plenary yesterday morning, I asked a question as to where is faith in all of what you've talked about, the future of mental health. And the first thing he said was very important. The first thing we need to do is separate what we mean by religion and spirituality. Okay, religion usually means an institutional set of practices and beliefs that operate in a community. Spirituality is a personal experience. It may be in a community, it may be connected with a faith community or not. And then in the research, there's another term you'll hear of religiousness or religiosity. And this is someone that may have beliefs and practices connecting with the sacred, but not directly affiliated with a religion. For instance, some of you may meditate and not be Buddhist. You may pray and not necessarily associate with a Christian church. You may do yoga and you're not Hindu. So that's what we mean by religiousness and religiosity. Come on in. Nope, come on in. So someone can be religious and not spiritual. Someone can be spiritual and not religious. Someone can be both, and someone could be neither. But what we're going to look at is how spirituality is universal. Here's New Jersey. This is what it looks like, religious composition. It looks, what, about 81% identify with a faith tradition of some sort. We'll just take a brief look at that. And when we look at America, this was a study asking the question, to what extent do you consider yourself a religious person? To what extent do you consider yourself a spiritual person? 70% have a combination of one or the other or both. most of us, in some way have an affiliation. And the question is, what do we mean by spiritual? Now, this is the coalition, and sort of this is our logo, AWARE. What we want in mental health, in faith communities, and even in our educational systems, are we aware of religious experience? I've been working with a lot of people in the past 2 years that have had truly spiritual religious experiences, and the police were called and they were taken to the hospital and they were hospitalized and they were forced against their wishes, medications, and it was traumatic. That should never happen. We want to get rid of that. New Jersey has an opportunity. This is the suicide mortality by state, and I want to show you by rank order. New Jersey has the lowest suicide rate in the nation. We're doing something right. And what we want to do is build on what we've been doing right. We've got some great systems operating, and sometimes we get discouraged and we even lose faith in our systems and the work we do. So this is to help us rejuvenate. Now, I'm going to share some quick cases. I'm just going to read them, but what I want you to look at is what would you do in these situations? A teenage girl calls 988. She's been humiliated by a boy she recently kissed and girls that are being mean. She lives with her mom and works 2 jobs, isn't available to talk. Her school counselor says to just ignore him. She doesn't fit in because she's a Korean Buddhist in a Christian community. She's been cutting herself recently, and it wasn't so bad. And now she has thoughts of jumping in front of a train. You're the 988 worker. What would you do? What if she came to you first? An African-American Baptist minister reaches out to his local mental health agency because his 25-year-old son has been caught up in drugs, having strange behaviors, and recently got hospitalized. He has been praying and working longer hours with his congregation, hoping things will change. He started having panic attacks that remind him of when he was a kid on the streets in a drug-ridden neighborhood with guns and violence that led him to the church. He's scared that he can't go on with his work. What would you do if you are the mental health agency? What if he came to you? A psychiatrist, we all do have problems sometimes, goes to his rabbi after having nightmares and is paranoid that the authorities are coming for him after one of his patients died by suicide. He has not left his house for the past week. It brings back memories of when he was 16 and his brother killed himself, and he felt it was his fault because he yelled at him the week before. What would you do if you're the rabbi? What would you do if he came to you first? And finally, a graduate student teaching assistant suffering from a broken love relationship prays to God and gets sudden relief of her pain in a spiritual experience. She becomes so happy and energetic and talks to her friends about connecting with God that they call the screeners for a well check, and she is taken by police to be admitted to the hospital. What would you do if you were in that situation? Right? My sense is every one of those would end up in an emergency room, in a hospital, and likely be admitted, right? What is the one thing that they all have in common that's being missed in our systems? Anybody? Faith. Every one of these people are in a faith crisis. They are losing faith in themselves, in the system, in their temple, in their institutions. and we don't even use the language. There is a moral core within us that is loving and compassionate and lives with faith powered by a courage that is functional, it's real, and it's what we would refer to as the soul experience. It really is present. We're learning an awful lot about it. The research that's been done regarding spiritual experiences, spirituality, and we have developed a program that is taking CBT, expanding it to the level of spiritual experience that literally promotes intentional spiritual awakening. And that's what I want to talk about. Now, why does faith not show up? This is the federal social determinants of health, and you see economics, physical environment, education, food, community and social context, healthcare system. Where's spirituality? Anywhere there? Not even there. Not even on the roadmap. This is our major model of medicine. The biopsychosocial model, the idea we have a biological, psychological, sociological part of our personality that when it is balanced in some magical way, we have health. Right? Where's spirituality? Does it just get stuck here or stuck there? Probably not. How about there? We'll talk about where it can be stuck. Since 2000, we have thousands of papers with evidence that religious and spiritual experience has a positive relationship with mental health, optimism and hope, self-esteem, meaning and purpose, social support, marital satisfaction. We have studies that show it's almost in all settings, almost all ethnic backgrounds, different age groups around the world. We have studies, and they all repeatedly show it helps with stress, depression, suicide, anxiety, and substance abuse. This is a summary. It's just overwhelming evidence. Why isn't it in our system? All right. Now, because we don't live with a spiritual attitude. And you say, what's a spiritual attitude? We have hundreds of different ideas of what that might mean. Let me give you an idea that we're looking at from maybe the possibility of a common language. That if we could in any way get this language into mental health, addictions, educational, and this approach is non-sectarian, non-religious, universal language, secular language that in no way should challenge issues of separation of church and state. Okay? That's the problem. Now, spiritual experience and spirituality begins with there is an unseen order. Let me read this quote. Were one asked to characterize the life of religion in the broadest and most general terms possible, one might say it consists of the belief there is an unseen order, and that our supreme good lies in harmoniously adjusting ourselves thereto. This belief, this adjustment, are the religious attitude in the soul. And William James, one of my favorite authors, uses religious the way we and the way I'm using the word spiritual today. What does that mean? For all of history, in the objective world, there was an unseen order until Sir Isaac Newton identified it as the laws of gravitation and motion. What we're talking about, there is an unseen order in our subjective experience that looks sort of like this. And I'll talk about how, just briefly, we'll go into, begins with a CVT approach. We have thoughts, we have feelings, we have actions. There are integrated experiences of self-worth, integrated experience of dignity that is redefined, different than anywhere else in the world, that open a door. And let's talk about it. I mentioned we have a spiritual core, and we have it out of awareness, and we can tap into it. How many of you, and I'll be very personal, would say that you have had what you would call a spiritual experience? Yes? Okay, that's about it. Usually in most groups, it's about 25 to 30%. Often in mental health settings, it's a little less, and when you get to the medical school, it's way less. Okay? So let's look at this in some detail. What do I mean by the word? There are thousands of definitions. I'm going to show you what I use as a functional definition, and I use it because it's got some very good direction to go into. The quality of the relationship to whomever or whatever is most important or supreme in life. Quality. A quality is what makes it real. A quality is absolutely real, but it's ineffable. Hard to put into words. How do you put the quality of soft into words? And don't use the word not, like not hard. That's what makes spiritual experience ineffable. It's a quality. It also is not a thing. It is not an achievement. It is a relationship. An ongoing relationship that never ends. You don't get to a point where, well, maybe if you're enlightened, but we'll talk about that afterwards. And it's in relationship to whatever is most important in being human. Right? Does that fit? Okay, I'm just looking for... And any of you that have had a spiritual experience, it probably has at least one or more of these characteristics. So we sort of know when someone is in those moments. There is a sense of connection with something beyond our ordinary experience. We refer to them as non-ordinary experiences. There is a sense of aliveness and vitality that wasn't there 2 minutes before. There's a sense of wholeness and integrity. There's usually an emotional connection. It may be peace, serenity. It may be joy. It may be awe, depending on the circumstances. And finally, within that, there's a meaning and purpose. Any of you that have had a spiritual experience, you had at least one of those? At least, if not several. So this is the language. The language is worth and dignity, but what does that mean? Definition. That quality, again, it's a quality. That's why this is so difficult. Of a person or thing that lends importance, value, merit, measurable by the esteem in which the person or thing is held. In the area of thinking, it's self-confidence, self-esteem, language we use, self-competence or self-efficacy. These are all psychologically defined, can be measured, so it's operationalized. We know it's developmental, so youth have a role in this. Children, what do? They become competent first. 3 to 4 years old, they expand their emotions, usually in response to no. 5 to 7, the brain myelinates, and there's a huge jump in thinking, and that's when self-confidence, the thought that I can do these things, and that's the Superman and the Wonder Woman period we all went through. Remember the capes and jumping off the couch? And the capacity that we have within us for self-worth only matures in latency, 8 to 10 years old. So there's a growth. And shame, we learn, is not just a feeling, it's not just an emotion, it is the injury to all of self-worth. And that's what makes it a little hard to capture. It isn't just a feeling, it's a body sensation, it's a thought, it's a comprehensive impact on being. Now, dignity is the same way. The quality, again, a quality of being worthy of esteem or honor. Honor is the core of dignity. And, as I said, we're using dignity different than anywhere else in the world, and I've looked. Everywhere, there's a whole field of dignity theory. Dignity is a noun, something someone has, something someone achieves. Dignity should be treated as an expression of being. And what is it that we honor most about being human in the area of thinking? Reason, making choices with reason, expanding with experience to wisdom. What do we honor most about being human in the area of feelings? Compassion. Beginning with empathy, because we have mirror neurons, we have language, we have the capacity to feel. At every moment, our mirror neurons connect us with each other. And what do we honor most in the area of action in human experience? Courage. We always hold up the fact that we, with our knowledge, know what might happen. I might get killed, and I'm still going to do it. And courage begins with honesty with self and others. If we can't be courageous enough to do that, then we don't have a reality, which is what we're struggling with right now. And eventually, we no longer have to protect ourselves. And the area of action that we honor most in action as we mature is giving and generosity toward human flourishing. That's the goal. And what we learned also is guilt. Guilt is not just a feeling. Guilt is an injury to all of dignity. I should have made a better decision with reason. I should have had more empathy or compassion. I should have been more courageous and stood up for myself or stood up for that other person, or I should have been more honest. So as soon as you're in our mental health settings and we hear guilt, well, I'm going to think dignity. I'm not going to think punishment. When I hear shame, I'm going to think self-worth and how do I empower that? I'm not going to think, okay, poor you, and get caught up in sympathy. Why is this the language and why is this so important? And this was a discovery that just happened. When we strengthen our core self-worth and dignity, process the injury to self-worth and dignity, when we strengthen it, something opens. When we do that, that spiritual core opens. And many of you that do trauma work, there are those moments when you really connect with that person, when they get in touch with their self-worth and dignity that they lost. Something happens. Now, these days, we have to add another arrow, because the psychedelics open this spiritual core, and the therapy for integration gets the person to an experience and an integration of their self-worth and dignity. It's for real. We know how to begin using it. Now, what's even greater is when we strengthen self-worth and dignity, a whole other area that we call the creative forces. We use that word because when it hits you, it's powerful. And the first one that hits you in a spiritual experience is usually love. Not love like an emotion, not love like a commitment, like I love you, but the agape, the love of God, the divine, maybe even the higher self if you're an Eastern religious person. The love of life, again. In the area of thinking, what opens is truth. And this isn't truth like right or wrong, good or bad. This is what Mahatma Gandhi talks about as the truth force, the satyagraha. We have a gut reaction. We have a moral core built into us. And any of you remember when you watched the videotape of George Floyd getting killed? Ugh! Gut wrenching. That's our moral core. It's in everyone. Even, I did a study using this method with men that had been incarcerated for years, and even though they are doing repeated criminal acts, when they get beyond that facade and that attempt to adjust their well-being, this moral core was injured. And they recognize, yes, I should not have been doing that. And finally, in the domain of action, it's faith, right? It is faith, not like a belief, but an action. It's the faith of taking that leap into the unknown, having no guarantee what's on the other side, having no guarantee that you're even going to make it, right? When you have a spiritual experience, you step out the next day and it's like, oh my God, how am I going to do it? It's a new world. And this is what we can offer that leads to a meaning and purpose. The spiritual attitude, when we live this, and us as mental health professionals usually live this whether we are aware of it or not, a commitment to the worth and dignity of every person, including ourselves, because self-compassion is very important. And what happens to this old model? Where does spirituality belong? Right in the center. It's the core. Religious community here, spiritual practices, there's even a biological and psychological part to spirituality, but it's the core. And so opening this spiritual core, using our reason, courage, and compassion, opens us to healing. And the center of this is spiritual experience. In all of our mental health work, what you're aiming for is their enhanced self-worth and dignity. And when you get down to that really injured level, it's spiritual. You've affected the spirit. So I always like this little dance. That we open the reservoir of healing that is in our spiritual core. It's the source of healing and happiness, and it moves all of mental health away from pathology. We're all good to begin with. And we need to move into well-being and health away from pathology. So, how do we do it? Make a commitment to the worth and dignity of every person, including ourselves, and live it. Every day, it's tough, because in order to do that, we have to transform ourselves. We have to walk the walk. We don't always treat people to empower their self-worth and dignity, do we? No. And we don't do it intentionally. It's habit. We have to break habits. We have to strengthen our reason, our compassion, open our hearts, strengthen our courage, which is part of what's missing in mental health. Our systems sort of destroy it. Share it with others, and over time explore how it opens up that spiritual experience. When you use this model, you set yourself up for spiritual experience, spiritual experience, spiritual experience, until you feel you're connected to the source. This is our opportunity. So this coalition is an attempt to get this conversation out there, and we're just putting it here for comment, feedback, and I'm doing trainings starting in May and June. We're going to train people in this model, beginning with a half day, 4 hours introduction, so you really get a sense of how this works. If people then are interested, we'll do a 2-day training where you live it. We take you through experiences to use this model to learn how to reconnect with that spiritual core that we all have. So there are some brochures out there. These are not publicly released yet, but hopefully by next Monday they will be. It's going to be at Rutgers. It's only $25. Unfortunately, we have no CEUs for it yet, but come. We are welcoming not just mental health workers, but faith community leaders. And I'll leave you with my quote. And thank you very much. I appreciate your feedback. I can see that something's connecting because I live and talk in some professional circles where I talk this language, I just get a blank stare. You know it.